TechChalk, a technology podcast.
Welcome back to TechChalk. Chris, and we've got Nick again today on
Hello.
our podcast. So today our topic is going to be about malware. Now I know there is a lot of different types of malware, and not many users or people know the different types, or they think if their computer is running slow that they have a virus. Um, when it could just be malware or other bad extensions or unwanted programs that are just bogging up their computer. Um, and basically, the more knowledge you have of which ones uh, are what, you can better try and get rid of them, repair them, or know the steps on uh, how to correct the issue. So, mostly what is used to get rid of malware or other types of viruses are mostly categorized into two different groups: anti-malware and antivirus software. Anti-malware software used to be more popular in the past. It is kind of dying out now as more programs just become a part of
Yeah.
antiviruses, or they just start blocking everything as a whole.
And everything's just getting amalgamated. So it's programs that used to have all those pieces separately are now either those companies are gone or they've been melded into something else, or separate products get melded together, which is something Norton has done, for instance.
Yes. Yeah, they have. Um, but mostly anti-malware specifically dealt with just removing malware and other malicious type programs, while antiviruses dealt with both removing malware and the harder viruses. Even now, up to days to the most harshest type of virus, ransomware and
Ugh.
worms and other stuff. But we'll get to those different types um, in a bit. So first, we're just going to start out probably with the smallest type of virus, which isn't necessarily too harmful at all, and that's mostly just adware. Um,
It's a gateway virus.
it is a gateway virus. Adware is usually just, it's potentially malicious advertising. And it could be anything from a browser extension that was accidentally installed that just constantly pops up ads when you're trying to browse the internet. Or it could be attached to a program that you've downloaded and pop up as notifications on your actual operating system.
Or if you're a little nostalgic and you still use Internet Explorer, it could come up in the form of a dozen toolbars.
Yes. Oh man, those toolbars were absolutely terrible to deal with
It's
back in
awful.
the day. They were ridiculous. Um, Mostly adware isn't too bad or malicious on the scale. Um, the worst thing that they'll do is pop up random advertisements, or sometimes they'll have tracking cookies that'll just track you through what websites you go to, uh, just to try and get you to click on their ads and stuff. It's not too bad in the sense of being harmful to you or your device, but it is still considered malware.
And I know what they like to do as well is change your search provider.
Yes, that is a big one, and that's a good thing we should talk about as well. The ways to notice how the different types of malware affect your machine, and a big tell from adware is that your browsing search provider is changed to one that you didn't set, or that a lot of the websites that you go to as well, their URLs look a little bit different. They have a different beginning little tag there. So you're not going to google.com, you're going to adware.google.com, and it looks
Find
just
my
like it, but
google.google.com.
yeah, exactly.
Uh, Something relatively innocent like that most of the time.
Yes. They're very easily removable. Any antivirus or malware program, or even just straight up uninstalling the browser extension, if that happened to be the case, will completely solve your issue um, for that type of malware. The next type of malware that is also it's potentially malicious. It doesn't necessarily have to be, but it also has some of the biggest false flags are pups, and pups stand for potentially unwanted programs. Now, pups usually show up mostly with, well, did used to show up mostly with anti-malware type programs and don't show up often in antivirus programs, but they still can. And potentially unwanted programs or pups mostly were labeled as pups if it made some change to your computer that was not normal. So a big false flag of a pup is usually like a VPN. VPN sometimes do get flagged as being potentially unwanted malware because it is changing your network uh, settings on your computer.
Yeah.
Even though that is its purpose, it still gets flagged as being bad.
Oh, and sometimes they even so you could end up getting a pup inadvertently by downloading something that you want,
Mm-hmm.
and then that pup could then install the extensions we talked about previously. So something like
Exactly.
instead of using Google Maps, you go off and find another map-based website, and you download its third-party tool to live in your taskbar to use on a regular basis, and then all of a sudden stuff just starts showing up in your browser. That's a pup.
Yep. They and some of them are malicious, like in that sense, as you said. So, really, the best way to try and recognize a pup is if you're installing a piece of software, make sure you're reading everything as you're installing it and you're not installing anything extra that you wouldn't want, or just basically running your antivirus or anti-malware scans. And if it shows up as malicious, just read what it is. And if it's something that you use normally, just say that it was a false positive and let it go on its way. So it shouldn't be recognized too bad. But if it is something that is bad or something that you did not originally install onto your computer, then it could be malicious, and then you should be able to remove it. Um, Mostly, pups aren't harmful too much. What can come through them is mostly what's more harmful.
Hmm.
Like you had said, Nick, about extra extensions being downloaded or other things being downloaded, but mostly the potentially unwanted programs are kind of just there to, I don't even know,
Well,
just be there.
they're a gateway to probably the stuff that we're going to talk about next.
Yes. Yeah. Very true.
Because with what pups are, you either intentionally or inadvertently, intentionally or unintentionally, had given that thing access to your device. Therefore,
Mm-hmm.
it goes, the system goes, oh, you said yes to this, so it can do what it needs to do. And most people have admin permissions on their user account on their personal computers, which means this
Mm-hmm.
thing has full reign. It can do what it wants.
Yep. You could do just allow anything through if it needs to.
Hmm.
And I did also forget to mention at the start of the podcast as well, we'll have a future podcast talking about uh, the differences between antiviruses and anti-malware mostly, and what they do and the things that they have to offer, which ones are the best ones to help with removing these types of malware. So
So
if you enjoyed this podcast, stay tuned.
now is the bad stuff. Later is getting rid of the bad stuff.
Yes. Yep. Later's getting rid of it. But we won't make you late too long.
Nah.
Besides those sort of lesser known malwares, I'm not sure if there's anything else besides we actually starting to get into the actual no more commercially recognized malware.
The stuff that throws big red flags to giant corporate entities like McAfee and Norton.
Yeah. Uh, so I
as
think the next. Go ahead.
oh no, as far as I know, what we've already discussed covers most of the everyday things that people run across.
Yeah. pretty much so. So then getting into the more like medium style, medium level malware, uh, on the list would be spyware.
Mm,
And spyware is a specific type of program that is meant to track you. So it sort of works like adware, where it can like track the websites that you're going to, but if it's a specific type of program, it can do a lot more than that because it can monitor the programs that you use. It can even go as far as to uh, record what you're going or where you're doing, allow other exploits within the system through as well for even worse types of malware and viruses
as
in its sense.
I don't think. God, how long was I at that old job? I don't even think I came across all that much spyware in comparison to what's probably going to come next.
Yeah,
Um, because quite frankly, there's almost no real profit in spyware anymore.
yeah,
Because short aside, tinfoil hat on, everything tracks your data. That's what cookies are for.
yep, yeah,
So back in my day, that spyware was a bigger thing, and now not so much. But it is still, much like pups, it's still an entryway into worse forms of actual malware.
yeah. And I think that one of the ones that, uh, being next on the list and is most well known, is Trojans.
Duh.
Now, Trojans
Mm,
are a bad type of malware to receive.
they're very
Uh,
naughty.
they're very bad. Um, Basically, what a Trojan does is it pretends to generally be a type of program or downloadable file or some type of content that you allow to install onto your system. The Trojan will then act as a backdoor into your computer. Sort of like pups and kind of spyware, it doesn't necessarily allow, well, it does allow other types of malicious programs to come through. It can specifically even allow whomever made that Trojan to start with possibility of accessing your computer as a whole, its files, the data, everything.
And it's I dealt with plenty of those before,
Yes.
and unlike spyware and pups and all the little annoying stuff, they are not the worst, but one of the worst things to try and get rid of, because
Yes.
there will be some instances where they populate and you can't track them down and you can't get rid of them.
Mm-hmm.
So, and we can go into that a little more later because I have some anecdotes.
Yeah. But yes, yeah, a Trojan actually gets its name from the Trojan horse of the Battle of Troy. Um, all those years ago, it's basically just it is perceiving to be one type of thing, and in reality, something very bad is hidden on the inside. So they're very hard to get rid of, and they're kind of hard to spot as well,
Hmm.
just from a normal user standpoint. That's why having an antivirus program will help because it is known to try and search and recognize those types of files and the way that the programs work to
Yes.
remove them before they can actually do some harm onto your computer.
A good antivirus and a healthy safety internet browsing regimen. I'm not sure how else
Yes.
you really want to put that. Common
um,
sense internet browsing. That's it.
oh yes. I guess then the next one on the list was mostly just be unless was there a middle one that you had because I was going to jump straight into just normal viruses.
I mean, so the problem is you can go into little stuff, but it's
Yeah.
really um, now as an aside, what would you
Mm.
consider phishing? What how would you classify that?
Oh, very good. I'd classify that. I would have stated that one a little earlier in the podcast.
Because that would
It's
go
not.
before Trojans IMO. Like
Yeah,
it's
it
not
would
as
go
bad.
before Trojans, but probably around where the pups and um, the spyware occurred, I would believe, because phishing. Well, yeah, you stated it. You want to
Well,
take it
because
over?
it's phishing is it's kind of like a more direct approach compared to spyware.
Mm-hmm.
We obviously know what it is, and through our own jobs, we know that people are susceptible to it. It usually comes through uh, email.
Mm-hmm.
It's the primary gateway to it, and you as the user have to interact with it and put in your own information. Now, it's not necessarily an attack in the same way that a Trojan goes after your computer or gives uh, your computer a really hard time. It's more like spyware, where someone wants as much information as possible,
Mm-hmm.
and you as the user have to enter that in. It's the same thing with spyware, but spyware is a little more devious in the sense that you're not supposed to know it's there, but it's
Yeah.
still there's and again, this is not to scare anybody. Spyware has a chance of having a keylogger inside of it. Get
Yes. Yeah.
things like personal information, address, phone numbers, passwords, that sort of
Mm-hmm.
thing. Um, phishing is it has to be initiated or it has to be sent by someone and initiated by someone else. But it's not necessarily an attack in the normal sense of a virus.
Yeah.
That's kind of how I'd put it.
Yeah. The repercussions of the phishing attacks can be a lot more detrimental
Yes.
than some of the spywares and stuff because in and of itself, phishing can be harmless. If you recognize, oh, hey, they're trying to get my information, you don't click on any links in the email, you don't visit any websites that you don't know, it's very, very easily preventable.
Hmm.
But if you do fall for it and, you have your password, one type, one type password, you have one password for all of your accounts across the internet, including your banking, to your Facebook, to anything, if you give that away in a phishing attack, that can be a whole lot more detrimental than a spyware or a Trojan, where it could be you give more direct access. So that's why it's very hard to place phishing on the
Hmm.
scale of malware because although it can be very very easily avoided, if it's not depending on how the user themselves uh, deals with online accounts and things, it could very much lead to detrimental things.
Yes.
Um,
TLDR, you're gonna have a bad time.
yeah, absolutely. I'll probably edit that in the podcast, rearrange that rearrange our
You're
stuff a
gonna
little
have a
bit, but
bad time.
gonna have a bad time. Um, so next, I guess would you say it just as you mentioned, like keyloggers
Hmm.
and other types of malware like that are just straight up viruses. Now, viruses is just sort of the umbrella type term uh, because there's so many different types of viruses and things that can go wrong for a computer, but they all share the same type of purpose, which is why they're all generally classified as viruses. And viruses are mostly what you hear, in the news or what's most common when people are like, "Oh, hey, my computer's running slow. It's doing all things it shouldn't do. I think it has a virus." Mostly computer running slow is mostly some of the lesser uh, most of the lesser malwares or some of the very higher end malwares. Viruses in and of themselves mostly sort of just infect computers and that are just meant to provide some type of vulnerability within the system and then sort of just spread itself. Just to infect other files, infect flash drives that are plugged into the computer, basically just to spread itself, generally as far with human help as possible. Um, Now, each virus can do something different. Some viruses are just meant to scan your computer, see what types of files you got, and send it back somewhere. Some viruses might just try and track to see if you'll enter in username or passwords like with keyloggers. It'll try and just get what you type in. Hopefully, you type in a username and password for a bank or something, send that info back, and it doesn't really care if, it goes off to as much people as it possibly can or not.
And it's in some cases its purpose not only is to what's the phrase self-propagate,
Yeah.
um, but to bring in more of its kind. So in
Yes.
in some cases you could bring in, and this is what I meant earlier by pops and adware are kind of like a gateway. Um, so you see
Hmm.
an ad for a program you want, you think it's legit, you click on it, you get a couple chunks of adware. You don't think about it because it's not like annoying you because now we know Windows 10 has the notifications in the bottom right corner that pop up from time to time, and you think it's legit. And after a while, more stuff pops up, and more stuff pops up. You're getting notifications for things you didn't click on, you didn't install, you didn't apply for.
Hmm.
Um, and I have seen this, but not in the day where SSDs were common or solid state hard drives, where it there is so much installed and running in the background that the
Hmm.
computer is literally unusable.
Yeah. It just fills up that hard drive with just replicating itself and just trying to infect as many files as it possibly can, or to make more just in the off chance of spreading itself.
Exactly.
And those can definitely be very harmful depending on what type of virus that you just so happen to have picked up. Um, I think the only difference between the general viruses and probably the next one we're going to talk about, which is definitely on the very high detrimental list of viruses and malware, is worms.
Hmm.
And worms are sort of like the worst version of a virus, because a worm's purpose is to infect your system, dig as far as it can, and then replicate itself like viruses. But where viruses do need other human interaction in order to spread, viruses need you to send that file to someone else. Viruses need you to stick in that flash drive and stick it into someone else's computer. Worms can spread themselves. They do not need any interaction with the user or the computer whatsoever. It will take care of itself and spread as far as it needs to through whatever means it finds necessary. And that's through either programming languages or taking control of, the firewall or something else, just to allow its own specific throughput to the internet. Um, it can be very, very bad and detrimental to a computer system.
And it's funny because there have been times where I've seen worms piggyback on Trojans.
Yes,
So
yeah,
it's
worms
not
will hide in Trojans.
not only do you get this thing where its purpose is to self-propagate, then you get something else inside it that's designed to destroy.
Yep.
And uh, dozens of times, we have had to tell somebody that their computer, their operating system, is irreparable.
Yeah.
And this is after XP, but before Windows 10. So from Vista through 8 and 8.1, um, where the OS didn't have that repair feature.
Hmm.
So imagine telling this person who is just laid out, I don't know, any amount of money for a virus removal, basically telling them, yeah, we can't complete the job, we need more money, and now all your stuff, your precious memories, your picture of the child chewing on your railing, is might be gone forever.
Yeah. And there's nothing that you could do to stop it, except possibly have an antivirus program. Hopefully, its active protection would catch that. But
Yes,
I
and
think
or its firewall.
enter its firewall. Yes. And like you were saying, that's probably one of the most other detrimental thing, and that's probably past the next two that I wanted to talk about, is that many viruses and malware can piggyback off of each other or within each other. So just because you have one doesn't necessarily mean you have the worst one,
Hmm.
but it can. Um, and that's one of the more dangerous things. That's why it's always good to practice. Not that we're trying to scare anybody into, never downloading another program off the internet, but just to be safe and make sure that you have protection just in case on the off chance that something does happen. Um,
And I think that could also lead into another topic that could be discussed as well. It's safe practices or good practices for the internet, for using a
oh,
regular
yes.
computer today.
That'd be a really good topic.
Yeah. So it's it may sound like common sense to us, but
Yeah.
God forbid somebody who's not us stumbles onto this. They have
Yes.
those questions.
Exactly.
Yes. But Chris is absolutely right. Common sense practices on one of these computers, but the majority of time will keep you away from the bigger issues, the bigger
Yes.
viruses, the more destructive malware, so to speak.
Mm-hmm. And speaking of even more destructive malware,
That
sort of like
segue.
how that segue, perfect. If only we could do that for a sponsor.
Yes.
uh, like how worms like to dig down into your computer system, the next worst level type of virus is a rootkit. And rootkits are meant to dig deep down into your computer's operating system and then plant itself in the core files of your operating system. And I have had issues, when I've freelance just repaired computers and cleaned out PCs and stuff, that some rootkits are very hard to get rid of because they will attach themselves to the core file of an operating system. So even if you completely wipe your whole computer and you just try and reinstall Windows, just by default through its own, uh, repair and rebuild option, the rootkit could still be there
Mm-hmm.
and just completely as the viruses that we've been talking about getting worse and worse, they mostly do what the before ones allow it, and rootkits basically just allow that. They attach themselves to the core of the operating system and then just screw with it. They can fill up your hard drive. They can allow backdoors. They can allow other viruses or malicious programs to install themselves. It can generally do just whatever it sees fit.
And they just bury them. I mean, like you said, it's it's in the name, a rootkit.
Yep.
It gets in there and it buries itself in the operating system. And I mean, so one of the biggest things that I've seen at least is for users who are um, a little more prepared than general, the ones that have say a backup hard drive or they have a regular
Yeah.
backup regimen. If they end up getting a rootkit, they're the kind of people that are affected the most. Um,
Hmm.
because then not only have you done the right thing,
Yep.
that right thing has also been affected. So, because a lot of times you won't know if you have a rootkit, so you can run system image backup, which is sometimes something we set up for clients years ago. It was a regular thing. Um, well, me, I don't know about
Yeah.
Chris.
Yeah. Yeah.
Um, he freelanced. I had store
Yeah.
job. Um, maybe that's something we can also talk about later.
Yeah.
Uh, but it dug itself in, and you know, the person that they come in and they feel like they've done the right thing, and they go, "Oh, I've got my backups, so I've got my backups," and you have to tell them it's like, look, we've got to sift through this because we don't know what this hit.
Yeah.
So
Exactly.
not only are you trying to work on their computer that's got all their stuff on it,
Hmm.
you then have to take the thing they thought was right and scan through that too, and in the worst case scenario, none of it's good, and you have to start all over again.
Yeah. They lose everything. And speaking of just completely losing everything,
Oh boy.
the absolute worst type of malware and virus that you can get,
Next virus.
the next virus, the worst one that you can get is what's called ransomware.
Ugh.
And I know that has been on the news a lot more lately, just because it's becoming more and more popular, especially along with cryptocurrencies being a form of payment. Ransomware is a type of virus that once it gets onto your computer, it will encrypt everything with a specific key. It will use a private key and a public key. Now, instead of getting too technical, the way you encrypt something is that you generally use two different quote unquote keys, which are just sort of encrypting strings that are used. And one of them is generally held by one person, and the other is held by the other person. And you kind of need both to open a door. It's like those doors in those movies where two people got to stick a key in a wall and turn it at the same time. It's generally the same exact thing. Um, the only problem is that ransomware will encrypt your entire hard drive, every single file, all the core files, everything, all of your pictures, even root access, you know, operating system folders, and it will just display a warning on your screen saying, you know, you've been infected with this ransomware, and if you want any of your stuff back, which is basically if you want our key, because the way that ransomware works is that it uses the encryption key on your computer and then the encryption key on their computer and then encrypts your drive.
Hmm.
Basically, if you want our encryption key in order to decrypt all of your files, then you have to pay us. And mostly it's in cryptocurrency like Bitcoin or other types of cryptocurrencies because that's very, very hard to track. Online currency is hard to track, and it the price constantly fluctuates, so it's always
What?
worse for the end user. Because it could be like, oh yeah, we want 100 bitcoins. Well, 100 bitcoins on Monday could be $1,000, and 100 bitcoins the next day could be $13,000. Like,
On
it's
before the whole cryptocurrency thing took hold, and this
mm-hmm.
is something we can get into, is they used to ask for gift cards,
Yes, gift
and
cards are another form.
it's because again, that's what I saw the most of. Because with our current job,
Yeah,
um, we don't see a whole lot of that anymore because we're kind of
correct.
under the security blanket. But in my old job, I was around normal consumers,
Mm-hmm.
um, everyday users, and there were tons of variants of ransomware standalone. But most of the
Oh
time,
yeah.
because this was before the Bitcoin craze,
Yes, yeah.
um, they'd ask for an Amex credit card, Target gift card, Walmart gift card, that sort
Mm-hmm.
of thing. And then you'd either have to mail it or uh, give them the code on the back of
Code.
the card.
Yeah, yeah. In order to pay for it, and
Hmm.
then even if, and I know some people have in the news, some people do pay that amount of money, whatever they're asking for, in order to get their files decrypted. But there is zero guarantee that even if you pay for it, that whoever made that ransomware is going to decrypt your files and give everything back to you.
Exactly.
And even if they do, you know, hold to their word and decrypt all of your files, they could have pulled and saved any type of file that they wished from your computer. So even if you do decrypt your files, anything you had on there, you know, is already screwed. You had bank statements saved, they got them. You had passwords saved in a junk text file, they got them. Like it's better to just wipe and start over at that point completely, than try and deal with paying them because there's no guarantee. And even I myself, I got hit with a ransomware at one point in time. It was over the summer. I had accidentally downloaded something I can't remember. It's just some Adobe plugin, but it wasn't what it seemed to be. And thankfully, it was my old laptop, so I didn't have anything on it. It was just a throwaway laptop. I didn't care what happened to it, but I had turned on the computer and it it's so old that it didn't connect to the internet when it first starts up. That's how that's how old it was.
Oof.
But I had turned it on, and then I was like, "Oh, okay, yeah, I'm just gonna, hook," because it was summertime, and we went down the shore, and I was just like, "Oh, I'll hook my computer up to the TV. I'll launch Jackbox on Steam, and we'll have a grand old night." And I looked at the desktop icons and I was like, why are they all white? Why did they have a bunch of random written characters and letters? And what is this? I was like, nah, okay, maybe my desktop file just got corrupted or something. Let me just look up. Oh, wait, I can't find the game. Oh, wait, I can't even find my Steam games program file. Wait, I can't find anything on this computer. And thankfully, I guess I had turned off my computer before the ransomware had called back across the internet to wherever I had gotten it from. And because when I started up the computer, there wasn't any internet access, so it didn't go out to the internet to try and call whoever made it. So I was still able to luckily get into my computer to see what it had done, and it had encrypted every single file and just made it random characters dot ransom, and that was all it said, and it was everything. I couldn't even get into the settings. It encrypted those. That laptop was done, but it was still very cool to see from, just as being a computer technician wise, it was very cool to still be able to log into the computer and just see the absolute destruction and dig down into the. It's terrible to say, but it was really cool to see the destruction. And basically, I was just searching through the hard drive, the C drive. I was going into, like, Windows program file. I was going into everything I could and going as deep as I could, and it was just encrypted all the way down. The whole rabbit hole.
Well, that's very much like my mentality with what's going on in the world right now. Because
Yep.
we've been told to stay at home, etc., etc. Um, it's very much morbid like that. You know what's happening, but you're well, not fanatically. You're watching these numbers and these statistics with fascination. It's that same kind of thought process.
Mhm.
And I find it absolutely hilarious that you were even still able to get into the thing.
Yeah, I was very surprised too. Once I found out it was ransomware that encrypted it, I was like, how did I even log into this? Because usually they'll launch a splash screen and prevent you from even logging into the computer.
It will
Um,
not let you bring up anything, even
yeah.
the because there are still keyboard shortcuts that are used today in Windows 7 that were brought over from
Mhm.
Windows 8 and even Windows 7, um, that it completely locked you out of all normal interactivity. Like it's
Mhm.
this it had a stranglehold on the device.
Yeah.
Um, I and I personally I've had experience with a few different versions of ransomware. I mean, I think sh- anecdote time, basically
Yeah.
story
Yeah.
time. Um,
Story time.
as part of my old job, I used to work as a tech in a retail store. So we'd offer services from data backups, computer setups, in-home services, network setups, etc. Um, but around 2011, 2012 was when we saw a real spike in ransomware attacks for people. And
Mhm.
the three kind of major ones we saw, there was the FBI virus,
Yes,
right?
I remember that
Right.
one.
There
Yep.
was an NSA virus, and then there
Mhm.
was a DOE, DOD. There was another federal level version that they use the official seals from those departments in the splash screen.
Yeah.
The worst one, though, the worst one out of the three was the NSA virus.
Yes.
And here's where the story comes in. I take a while to get there. I'm sorry.
No, no, it's
Um,
okay.
well, I'm apologizing to anybody who's listening because that's my conversational
Oh, I,
style,
I rambled on.
unfortunately.
That's fine.
Uh, the I will never forget with the NSA virus. This poor woman came into the building
Mhm.
and she's got tears. And I'm not talking like, sniffles. I mean like she's full on sobbing before she brings this thing in. She's got tears running down her face, and you can't help but feel for the person. And she's like, I don't even want to open up the laptop. I'm like, well, what do you mean? How
Yeah.
can I help you? You're like, what's going on? Because you as someone who fixes problems wants to fix the problem.
Yeah.
And she says, I don't want to open it. I can't look at it. I'm like, what? She goes, just trust me. And I'm like, I have to. So I open the thing, and basically, what it said was you were going after, let's just say, um, underage erotic content.
Mm-hmm.
And it said, you've been reported to the NSA, and if you don't give us $300 in X gift card,
Yep.
you're locked out forever. It wasn't the message, it was the pictures.
Yeah.
It actually had the pictures, and that's what
Oh
I mean by
wow, really?
yes, it was disturbing, quite frankly.
Oh Jesus.
Um, I couldn't look at the thing for because thankfully I'm a fast reader. I couldn't look at
Yeah.
the thing for more than a few seconds and went, okay,
Yeah.
we have to bring this in. Um, and we used a vast array of tools that we'll talk about in the next cast because it
Yeah.
includes antivirus and anti-malware and some other tools to get rid of things like rootkits, for instance.
Yep.
Um, they're not as expensive as you think, thankfully.
Yeah.
But we used a whole array of tools. That is actually one of the machines we were able to recover.
Oh, that's good. Oh, a happy ending. Oh Jesus, I felt so bad listening to that. I was like, oh man, Granny.
Yeah, well, it's like she you couldn't help but feel awful, like genuinely
Yeah.
awful. You could have been the worst person in the world, and you would have been able to empathize.
Yeah.
Um, Now that being said, the other two were just as invasive and just as difficult to get rid of when we were able to get rid of them.
Yeah.
But they weren't. I mean, that it was just awful. And I saw a couple of them. It's like how like
No.
you just don't understand the mentality behind it. Like who finds this fun?
Exactly.
Because
Yeah.
you're, now not only are you costing people time and money, now you're basically going after their mental health.
Yeah. Exactly. And that's worse. That's the absolute worst.
But we did for about 2 years. We saw a steady stream. We had, you know, thank you people for giving me good business and keeping me employed, but don't do this.
Yeah.
Um, but we had a steady stream of them for a while, and we actually got very, very good at getting rid of ransomware.
Nice.
And again, we'll talk about it in the next podcast. Most of the tools
Yes.
are available to normal people. Uh,
Mm-hmm.
Tune in to the next one to hear all about it.
Yes. We're gonna make sure that you guys understand and know exactly how to protect yourselves from all of this stuff. Now, generally, we didn't. Yeah, as I said before in the podcast as well, we don't want to scare anyone with, the podcaster explaining exactly what the different types of malware and trojans and stuff can do. But the more knowledge that you have, the better that you can be prepared in order to not get them or on how to deal with them.
Hmm. And it's it's the same kind of thing as well, I mean things like chickenpox and measles and
Yeah.
it's these are worst case scenarios. Like
Mm-hmm.
most of the time with these viruses, the majority of the time that I dealt with them at my old job, and even with this one, early on when our antivirus was not good.
Yes. I remember.
um, Most of the time it's compiled adware and pups and things that just they
Mm-hmm.
add and add and add and add to the point where they're using so many resources the device becomes unusable or
Yes.
difficult to use.
Yeah.
That's the
Very
worst
much
that's
so.
going to happen most of the time.
Yeah. It's mostly just it's going to slow down your computer, and it's not too hard to get rid of it and get your computer working back to normal. Um, but instead of just leaving you hanging, as in listen to the next podcast, to which still please tune in. We'll tell you the best practices on how to prevent, you know, uh, malware and viruses, and we'll talk another podcast on the best practices on how to stay safe online and make sure your privacy is protected. We'll leave you with this specifically for malware and viruses. Don't download programs that you don't know are legitimate or directly from the source that they come from. Do not click on links that do not look like or act like how the website should. Do not answer specific emails that you do not know where the sender is coming from. And that will mostly protect you. You are the first line of defense in protecting your data and your computer. So just practice, basically, safe downloading, safe browsing, and you will be a lot better off and prevent any type of malicious program from taking down your computer at all.
Most
And
definitely.
yeah, and it's always good to have help with antiviruses and other privacy practices, and that's what we'll talk about in the next one.
Hmm.
But thank you, Nick, for stopping again and talking about these great but scary computer problems. Hopefully, our users enjoyed it as well.
Thank you very much for having me again.
No problem. And if you have any tech questions whatsoever, or there's other topics that you would love to listen to or learn about, please let us know. Email us at letstechchalk@gmail.com. You can find us on Twitter at TechChalk or use the hashtag TechChalk, and we'll do our best to answer the question or include it in another podcast.
Yes, sir.
But thank you for tuning in. Hopefully to see you again next time.
Tech Chalk, a technology podcast.